Hey guys, welcome back for today's video where I want to talk about the current system that's in place for the Democratic Party for nominating an individual to run for the presidency in the general election against the Republicans, the misgivings that I have about a lot of this process, and what I would do to change things. Now, before going in and talking about the order of the primary states, I want to talk about this nonsense that we have with the pledged delegates, super delegates, first ballot, second ballot, third ballot. It's way too complicated, and these superdelegates, they have to go. They are a poison to the party. The only effect that they can have is negative. Let's think about this for a second. So the pledged delegates, what we do is we go state by state. Whichever candidates get to that 15 percentage point threshold end up being part of the candidates that divvy up those pledged delegates. I don't have a problem with that system in particular. If you don't at least get to 15% of the vote in a state, I don't really feel all that bad for you if you're not getting some representation in terms of those pledged delegates. So I'm okay with that system. It's these super delegates. They're the party insiders that have been appointed to have this importance where if nobody gets to the pledged delegates needed on the first ballot, then you go to the second ballot where the superdelegates can put their thumb on the scale. Now, at least it's better in 2020. I'm sure a lot of you guys can remember back in 2016 where these superdelegates, they put their thumb on the scale before a single voter cast a ballot for any of these candidates. A ton of them got behind Hillary Clinton, and it made it look like she had an insurmountable lead before we even got to Iowa. It's a disaster that was allowed to happen in 2016. At least it's better now that we don't see who the superdelegates are supporting unless we get to that second ballot. But still, the only effect that they can have is negative, because think about it. The candidate who's leading in pledged delegates, even if they don't have 1,990, if the superdelegates back that individual and that candidate wins on the second ballot, no controversy, that's fine. But the only effect that they can have here is going to the second ballot and supporting somebody who's maybe second, third, fourth place. Who knows? And then you're subverting the will of the voter. An absolute disaster. They're a poison pill to this whole process. They need to be gotten rid of. And that's my rant anyways on this whole pledged delegate, super delegate fiasco that we could find ourselves going into in this nominating process. Now, beyond that, let's talk about the order of the states. So going into February, essentially these states are spread out about a week apart from each other. We go Iowa, and then around a week later, we go to New Hampshire, and then Nevada, and then South Carolina. Now, out of these four states, the only one that I agree with that should be early on is Nevada. Now, what are you looking for in these early states? Well, the candidates are spending a ton of time here with campaigning, doing these town halls. Their campaigns are spending a lot of time here, a lot of ad revenue. The voters are able to learn a lot about the candidates. I think that these first four states should be key battleground states, and also it would be nice if they were a little bit more diverse than the first two states that we have. So the Democratic Party, extremely diverse base of voters, especially when you compare it to the Republican Party, and I feel like that diversity should be represented to some extent in these very important early states. Right out of the gate, we go to Iowa and New Hampshire, which are two of the least diverse states in the country. I don't think that's a good look in terms of the significance that these early states have on this whole process for the Democratic Party. Now, South Carolina is a very diverse state, but the downside and why I wouldn't put them in the first four is it's not a battleground state. It is a safe Republican area, a lot of conservative voters here, a lot of conservative Democrats. But beyond that, this is not a state that's going to be competitive more or less as we head to a presidential election. So having a state like South Carolina be this important to the nominating process, I think, is a big mistake for the Democratic Party. Really, all of these strongly Republican-leaning states, I don't think should have a say early on in this process, not just in the first four states, but even through the month of March. Now, the first state that I would go to is Nevada. Out of these first four states, that is one I agree with. It is a diverse state. It also has a relatively small population, so the candidates can spend a lot of time getting to know a lot of these voters in this area. And it's also a battleground state. So I'm sticking with that one right out of the gate. I really like Nevada being early on in the process. So the second state that I'm going to go to is Wisconsin. Now, not an extremely diverse state, and it sounds like I'm being a little hypocritical because I gave Iowa and New Hampshire a hard time being right out of the gate, but I don't think there's anybody that's going to argue with me that Wisconsin is much more significant for the Democrats to win in 2020 than states like Iowa and New Hampshire. Arguably the most important state for the Democrats to flip in 2020 if they're going to win the presidency. And the more time that their candidates can spend in the state and allow the voters to get to know them, I think they're better chance at having success at winning in 2020. So my second state choice is going to be Wisconsin. My third state to go to in these first 4 results through February is going to be Virginia, another battleground state. It's one that's been trending towards the Democrats, but it's a diverse state, and not just in terms of the ethnic makeup of the Democratic electorate here, but also in terms of the fact that you have a lot of highly educated as well as suburban Democratic voters, as well as your blue-collar working class Democratic voters. It's an interesting coalition there. The 4th state that I'm going to is Florida, arguably the most important state almost every presidential election cycle, and I think the more time that the Democrats can spend in this state, the better. It's essentially usually within about 1 percentage point one way or the other, and having this be one of the key early 4 states, I think it would help the Democrats and be a big benefit to them to maybe having a bit more success in the state. So that's the order that I'm going in. First state, Nevada. Second state, Wisconsin. Third state, Virginia. Fourth state, Florida. And also, one thing that the current system has is the fact that the states are spread out all over the country with Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina. So I'm sticking with that system here by going first out west, then into the Midwest, then over to the east, and then into the southeast. Now, I'm actually really interested in who you guys would think would be great choices to be these first 4 states through the month of February. I've given my reasoning as to why I think it's Nevada, Wisconsin, Virginia, and Florida, but I'd love to hear who you guys think the best options would be for the Democrats to go to in these very important early results. Now, also, I want to talk a little bit about Super Tuesday. As we can see, these blue states are the states that are going to vote on Super Tuesday, which is one of the most important days during this whole process, given it's 1,358 pledged delegates up for grabs. And what you can probably notice is the importance of these southern states. Republican-leaning states in general are having a big impact on who ends up being the Democratic nominee. I think that's a really bad idea. If I was in charge, I would make Super Tuesday more or less be the battleground toss-up type states. These would be areas such as Michigan, Ohio, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, maybe even Montana you could throw in there. Democrats have shown that they can win there statewide, and they're wanting to be a bit more competitive in that state in presidential elections. Also, I think Arizona would be a good one to put up on Super Tuesday. Colorado, Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, New Hampshire, Maine, and I also think it's not a bad idea to throw California into the mix, given how important this state is to the Democratic Party with their large number of electoral votes. So that's kind of a mix of some of these states that I'd like to see early on in the process in Super Tuesday, where we can get these toss-up areas, these battleground states, having a bigger importance in this whole system that we have in nominating the best candidate possible to be the Democratic nominee running at the top of the ticket for the presidency. Again, I'm really interested in who you guys think the first 4 states should be, and then also just your general opinions on what you think of the pledged delegates, super delegates, first, second, third, fourth, fifth ballots. I think that even more so than the order that the states go in, this ballot system is a complete disaster. They have to simplify it down to the first ballot, and it just should be whoever has the will of the voters behind them, the most pledged delegates, should go on and win the nomination. If we have a system in 2020 where we go into, let's just say hypothetically, Bernie Sanders is leading the way at 40% of the pledged delegates, Biden right behind him at 35%, maybe it's Pete Buttigieg at 25%, and that's how the top 3 end up being. Well, nobody's going to win on the first ballot. Maybe you can even get a situation where Buttigieg and Biden form a unity ticket, and that would put their 35 and 25% together to get up to 60%. And that could win them actually on the first ballot and subvert the will of the voters who were at 40% in this hypothetical for Bernie Sanders. That's a disaster in and of itself, and I don't think that the candidates should be able to combine their pledged delegates in a manner to where they're able to surpass the first candidate. Now, I guess if it's a scenario where you have the candidate in first place combining with somebody else in a unity ticket to get enough pledged delegates to win on the first ballot, I guess that's okay. But you can just simplify this whole thing by making it whoever is in the lead, whoever has the most pledged delegates, that should be the party nominee at the end of the day. No more super delegates that are able to subvert the will of the voters. And just simplifying the whole system, I think, is a better idea in and of itself. So that's going to wrap this one up, guys. I ranted quite a bit longer than I was planning this video being, but that's all right. I appreciate any of you guys who actually ended up making it to this point in the video. Consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, and I hope to see you guys back here for future videos.